And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Immanuel Wilkins, his biography and best hits. Born in 1997 in Upper Darby, Philadelphia, Wilkins grew up steeped in church music, picking up the violin at age 3 and alto sax by 8. As a teen, he wowed crowds performing the national anthem at a Philadelphia Eagles game, and later honed his craft at Juilliard, guided by luminaries like acclaimed and Jason Moran. Wilkins made a splash with his debut Omega release in 2020, a bold, socially conscious suite confronting the black experience in America. Critics hailed it, and the New York Times named it the #1 jazz album of the year. His follow-up, the Seventh Hand release in 2022, expanded his spiritual and conceptual reach, featuring a 26-minute free improvisation called Lift. Blues Blood release in 2024 broadened his sound with vocals and ancestral themes, landing a 2026 Grammy nod. Also a versatile sideman, Wilkins shines with the Out of Into collective, Joel Ross and Jonathan Blake. Known for technical prowess, lyricism and emotional depth, Wilkins' music mingles post-bop, gospel and classical influences. So that was some insight into the biography and best hits of Immanuel Wilkins. More details coming up. Also, born on August 7, 1997 in Philadelphia's Upper Darby neighborhood, Wilkins was immersed in music from the earliest age. Alto saxophone by 8, and a young boy whose musical curiosity was nurtured by the church community around him. Philadelphia was just the beginning. By 2009, Wilkins had already captured attention on a national stage, performing the national anthem at a Philadelphia Eagles game, a sign of the extraordinary trajectory that lay ahead. After graduating high school, he moved to New York City in 2015 to study at Juilliard, where his teachers included jazz heavyweights like Bruce Williams, Steve Wilson, and Joe Temperley. But it wasn't just Juilliard that shaped him. Mentorships with trumpet Ambrose Akinmusire and pianist Jason Moran offered real-world insight into performances, composition, and touring. Wilkins also collaborated with some of the biggest names in jazz and beyond, from Wynton Marsalis to Gretchen Parlato. By the late 2010s, Wilkins was leading his own quartet featuring pianist Mika Thomas, bassist Daryl Jones, and drummer Kweku Sambri. This ensemble became his musical home, performing at New York jazz institutions like the Jazz Gallery, Smoke, and the Smalls. Their work culminated in Wilkins' debut album Omega, released in 2020. The album was widely hailed as a bold, socially conscious statement confronting racial injustice and celebrating Brazilians through tracks like Ferguson, An American Tradition, and May Return, An American Tradition. The New York Times even named it the #1 jazz album of 2020. Omega was only the beginning. Wilkins' sophomore release, The Seventh Hand, arrived in 2022 on Blue Note. The album featured his quartet with guest musicians like flutist Selena Pinterhughes and percussionists from the Farafina Ensemble, and includes the epic 26-minute improvisation Lift. This ambitious record earned Wilkins a Downbeat Critics Poll Alto Saxophonist of the Year, Rising Star Group, and Rising Star Composer. Then came Blues Blood in 2024, co-produced with Michelle and Cello, which broadened Wilkins' sonic palette with vocals and chant-like elements, exploring ancestral black history. Tracks like the title song, Blues Blood, confront historical injustice with haunting intensity. This album earned Wilkins a Grammy nomination in 2026 for Best Alternative Jazz Album. He's also a sought-after sideman. He's contributed to Joel Ross Kingmaker and Jonathan Blake's Homeward Bound. Even projects like Here It Is, a tribute to Leonard Cohen, where his alto shines on the instrumental track Avalanche. At the heart of Wilkins' music is a commitment to blending tradition with innovation. He draws from Charlie Parker, Ornette Coleman, and Gary Bartz. His compositions fuse classical, gospel, and jazz elements. Every project feels like it's reaching beyond the notes, beyond genre boundaries, and beyond expectations. There's a deep spiritual undercurrent that mix of structure and free improvisation, where tradition meets bold exploration. His records aren't just tracks stitched together, they feel like journeys with intention and purpose. It's reflective, powerful, and it moves with real emotional weight. Across his discography, you hear growth, depth, and a constant push towards something bigger than the moment. So basically, Immanuel Wilkins is not just a saxophonist. He's a composer, band lead, and visionary artist whose work reflects social consciousness, spiritual depth, and musical integrity. So that was some insight to the biography and best hits of Immanuel Wilkins, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Immanuel Wilkins, his biography and best hits. Now it's time for some trendy music news. So here's something electrifying for 2026. Renowned film composer and multi-instrumentalist Gerhard Dom is back with a new instrumental album titled Fusion Festival. Now you might know Dom from his powerful film scenes, including the US feature Felon and Germany's long-running crime series Tatort. But on Fusion Festival, he steps fully into the spotlight as performer. This record mixes intricate jazz harmony with pop sensibility and the energetic pulse of classic fusion, all wrapped in a modern, polished sound. Dom handles flugelhorn, guitars, bass and synthesizers himself, layering textures into a rich cinematic soundscape. And joining him once again is the phenomenal drummer Anika Nils, whose jaw-dropping precision and groove provide the perfect counterbalance to Dom's melodic lines and adventurous arrangements. From the sun-soaked vibe of Tropical Night to the slick drive of Fusion Wave and the laid-back glow of Mellow Moon, this album moves effortlessly between energy and atmosphere. Released on Dom's own Tonework Records, Fusion Festival is bold, virtuosic and forward-looking, a celebration of jazz fusion's roots and its next evolution. So that was some trendy music news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We are going for a short break, but we'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Immanuel Wilkins' best albums of all time. Stay tuned. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Immanuel Wilkins, his biography and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. So we are starting things off with a look at the first chapter of his career, his early studio albums that really put him on the map. We are talking about Omega, released in 2020, his debut on Blue Note Records that mixes social consciousness with intricate improvisation, and Blues Blood, released in 2024, a genre-blending meditative journey featuring vocals and a broader palette. In these albums, you'll hear Wilkins' alto moving seamlessly between bird-like bebop fluency, Coltrane-inspired intensity, from tight compositions to extended suites, from amazing solos to reflective hymn-like passages. These records showcase his voice both as a composer and improviser. So we'll be talking about the standout solos, the ways his quartet and supporting musicians make each album a vivid emotional experience. So that was some insight into what's coming up during this hour, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Immanuel Wilkins, his biography and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. First up, his 2020 debut, Omega, released on Blue Note. Critics were calling it possibly the most important jazz debut in years. Wilkins assembles a tight quartet, himself on alto, Micah Thomas on piano, Daryl Johns on bass, and Kweku Sambri on drums. The album was recorded in January 2019. It's a conceptual suite addressing the black experience in America. Wilkins' alto soars with a precision that feels both immediate and timeless, evoking Bird at times, Ornette Coleman at others, but always distinctly Wilkins. Then there are poetically charged pieces, Ferguson, an American tradition, and May Return, an American tradition, confronting historical and contemporary racial violence with musical elegance and unflinching directness. And the close, the jubilant Omega, leaves you with a sense of spiritual uplift, solos that feel celebrated yet profound. Critics love the album for this very balanced, structured composition that opens into imaginative, heartfelt improvisation. Moving forward, Wilkins' sophomore album, The Seventh Hand, released in 2022, keeps the quartet intact but expands the palette. Think spiritual, mystical, almost meditative in places. The opening track, Emanation, post-bop intensity. Wilkins' lines are taut, energetic, and yet somehow gospel-infused. Don't Break is a standout, this slow-building, soulful vibe, and then the Farafina ensemble joins in, weaving African polyrhythms under Wilkins' soaring alto. The closing 26-minute epic, Lift, is an ambitious, free-flowing, Coltrane-inspired improvisation. Now fast forward to Blues Blood in 2024. Here, Wilkins broadens his scope. Co-produced with Meshel and cello, this album introduces vocals and a variety of sonic textures, jazz, gospel, blues, and meditative ritualistic elements. Like Matte Glaze and Motion showcase his signature alto agility, while vocal pieces like Dark Eye Smile featuring Cecil McLaurin's Salvant add narrative depth. The title track, inspired by notorious 1964 case of police brutality, moves from jaunty to ominous. The Guardian praises Wilkins' ambition here, noting his lustrous talent and how he navigates this expanded musical terrain without losing his jazz roots. Finally, we have Out of Into Motion 1, released in 2024, the debut of the collective quintet led with Gerald Clayton on piano, Joel Ross on vibes, Kendrick Scott on drums, and Matt Brewer on bass. This was Blue Note's 85th anniversary project, and it's evident that this group was forged in fire, refined on the roads. Wilkins' alto lines intertwine seamlessly with Clayton's piano and Ross's vibes. Tracks build from composed heads into soaring improvisations. Critics have called it a model of contemporary post-bop. Motion 1 sends the stage for what will become a remarkable series of collective works. So across these 4 albums, Wilkins' alto is astonishingly versatile, capable of blistering bebop runs, lyrical melodies, and spiritually infused improvisation. Secondly, his compositional vision is clear. Socially conscious, emotionally rich, structurally adventurous. So when you listen to these albums from Immanuel Wilkins, one word really jumps out: transcendence. And that's the thread running through everything he puts out. The music feels like it's going somewhere deeper. It's rooted in jazz tradition, but it's not stuck there. You hear freedom, you hear structure, and you hear real emotion moving through every track. So that was some insight into some of Immanuel Wilkins' best albums of all time. On this week's episode, it's about Immanuel Wilkins, his biography, and best hits. Now it's time for some trending music news. Boston jazz fans, here's one you won't want to miss. On March 11th at the New England Conservatory, acclaimed pianist, composer, and educator Jason Moran takes a stage for a special residency concert devoted to the music of the one and only Thelonious Monk. The 8 p.m. performance happens in the intimate Plimpton Shattered Black Box Theatre, and admission is free. Now, this isn't just a tribute set. Moran, a MacArthur Fellow and one of the most adventurous pianists of his generation, is zeroing on vocal interpretations of Monk's music. Ever since Carmen McRae's landmark Carmen Sings Monk, artists have been exploring Monk's angular melodies through lyrics by Bernie Hannigan, John Hendricks, and Abbey Lincoln, reimagining Monk's wit, dissonance, and swing through a fresh contemporary lens. A Houston native who rose to prominence with Soundtrack to Human Motion, Moran has built a career mingling jazz history with hip-hop, visual art, and bold experimentation. As an NEG faculty member and former artistic director for jazz at the Kennedy Center, he brings both scholarship and fearless creativity to the bandstand. March 11th, Monk, Moran, and a night of inventive reinterpretation. Get your free tickets at necmusic.edu. So that was some trending music news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. We are going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Immanuel Wilkins' best albums of all time. Stay tuned.